Welcome to The Other, a place where reality shifts and the truth becomes far more unsettling than fiction. Tonight, we enter the silent world of those who guard the wilderness, the park rangers. People who spend their days surrounded by mountains, rivers, forests, and their nights surrounded by things they can't fully explain. These are 4 true park ranger horror stories, accounts from individuals who have seen every corner of the wild, yet found themselves facing moments that defied logic. Strange lights moving where no trail exists, voices calling from empty woods, footsteps circling their cabins long after midnight, and encounters with figures that vanished the moment they stepped into the beam of flashlight. These rangers know the forest better than anyone, which makes what they witnessed all the more disturbing. They weren't confused. They weren't imagining things. They knew something was wrong, deeply, dangerously wrong. If you're ready to hear what they've kept quiet for years, stay with me. And before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to The Other, because on the darker side of reality, there is always another story waiting in the shadows. People assume the scariest part of being a park ranger is the wildlife. Grizzlies, mountain lions, wolves. I've dealt with all of them, and trust me, none of them are the worst thing you can meet in Glacier National Park. The worst thing is when the forest goes silent. I learned that on July 11, 2016. I was assigned to check a section of trail near Avalanche Lake after a series of rockfall warnings. A simple patrol, the kind I could do half asleep. The sun was still low, the air crisp enough to see my breath. The morning birds were loud, chattering like always. Nothing unusual until they weren't. About 2 miles in, the sound just stopped. Not faded, not drifted away, stopped. Like someone flipped a switch on the whole forest. No birds, no insects, no rustling brush, just empty, suffocating quiet. I froze mid-step. Every instinct I had, every bit of training, every warning drilled into me, told me silence meant one of 2 things: a predator or something else. I scanned the area. That's when I saw it, a shape in the trees. It stood maybe 30 yards away, just past the tree line. At first I thought it was a person, tall, thin, shoulders slightly hunched like someone cold. But then the details didn't add up. It was too still. Even a statue sways when the wind hits it. But the wind hit the pines around it, and the needles moved, except the shape, and the body proportions were off. The torso was long, unnaturally long, and the arms hung low, almost to its knees. The head was tilted slightly to the right like it was listening, watching. I felt a pressure between my shoulder blades, the sensation of being observed. It was so strong I swear my spine tried to crawl out of my body. "Hello?" I called. It didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't shift, just stood there. I figured it might be a lost hiker in distress, or a poacher, or a stupid teenager testing boundaries. I took one cautious step forward. That's when I realized something else was wrong. The trees around the figure, all the pines within a few feet of it, were bent slightly inward. Not broken or snapped, just leaning, like a crowd of tall onlookers trying to hear a secret. And the pine needles on those leaning trees, they weren't moving in the wind. Everything around the shape was unnaturally still, like that patch of forest was frozen. My throat tightened. I radioed, "Unit 3, checking possible injured hiker near Avalanche. Might need backup." Static. Not normal static. A low hum, like someone dragging their hand across a metal grate. I tried again. More static. I lowered my radio, and the shape tilted its head further, as if curious. The silence pushed harder around me. I should have left, but I didn't. Because then it moved. It didn't step. It didn't walk. It just shifted. Like 1 second it was standing straight, and the next second it was a few inches closer, the torso angling forward. No transition, no motion blur, just instant change. My body locked up like my muscles were trying to protect me by refusing to move. My heartbeat pounded so loud in my ears I thought the forest might hear it. I said, "Don't come any closer." My voice cracked. It didn't listen. It shifted again, faster this time. and was suddenly 10 feet closer. Still silent. Still leaning. The trees around it leaned further too, bending like something was pulling them inward, drawing them toward its shape. I backed away slowly, keeping eye contact. My brain screamed, "Run," but every instinct told me if I turned my back, it would be behind me instantly. I forced out, "Stop!" It didn't. It shifted a third time. This time, it wasn't 10 feet closer. It was right at the edge of the tree line, barely 15 feet away. Close enough for me to see details. Its skin wasn't skin. It looked like tree bark stretched too thin, like something wearing forest material as a disguise. And its face. It didn't have one. Just a smooth, featureless head with a faint impression where a mouth might have been, if the world were more merciful. Then the trees around it began making noise. Not creaking, not rustling, whispering. Soft, frantic whispers, like dozens of voices trapped inside the trunks. I couldn't understand the words. Just a hiss of sound that rose and fell in a pattern that felt intentional. The shape leaned forward, as if listening to the trees. Then it straightened and turned its head slowly toward me, and the whispers stopped. Everything stopped again. The forest waited. I don't know why I did it. Maybe panic, maybe instinct, maybe the primal urge to let something know you're not prey. I shouted, "Get back!" My voice echoed unnaturally loud in the dead silence. The shape reacted. Its head twitched violently like a glitch in an old video. Its arms snapped downward. Its torso lengthened unnaturally, stretching like something unfolding. The trees bent sharply toward it. Then, it stepped out of the tree line. It didn't run. But the trees behind it shook violently, as if something much larger was moving between them, using the forest like a tunnel. I turned and bolted. Branches whipped my arms, my legs burned, my lungs felt like they were going to tear open. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel it behind me, the air changing, the forest reacting. Every few seconds, I would hear the whispering again. Then silence. Then something heavy shifting behind the pines. I've been chased by bears before. This wasn't that. This felt like being hunted by the forest itself. The trail forked. I took the left path without thinking, sprinting until my lungs screamed. Finally, blessedly, I heard birds again. A single chirp, then another. Then the whole forest came alive in a burst of sound. I slowed, gasping for air. The pressure behind me vanished. When I finally turned, the tree line was still. Whatever had followed me stopped at the boundary where the silence ended. The forest was normal again. 3 days later, I went back with 2 other rangers. Nothing. No tracks. No sign of a person. Not even bent branches. But the trees in that exact spot, the ones I saw leaning that day, they were still tilted inward, like they had bent towards something and never straightened. One of the rangers said it was wind damage, but the lean was too smooth, too uniform, too precise, like all of them had leaned together, reaching toward the same invisible point. I didn't report what I really saw. What would I write? Trees leaned toward a living, faceless thing that stepped between the pines. I just wrote, unidentified figure sighted, area checked, no hazard found. But every year when July comes around, I avoid that section of trail. Not because I'm scared of seeing it again, but because I'm scared it's still waiting, still listening, still leaning from the tree line, waiting for the forest to go quiet again. People assume rangers only patrol during daylight. They think the worst thing we face after dark is a lost hiker or a spooked black bear. That was true for most of my career, until the night I met the man who smiled too long. I've carried this story for 26 years, never filed an official report, never told another ranger. Some things don't belong in official records. This is one of them. October 2nd, 1998. Cold night, clear sky, almost full moon. I was doing the late shift around Big Meadows. Quiet night, only a few campers scattered around, some late hikers packing up. Nothing unusual. I remember thinking it was one of those nights where you feel like you're the only person awake in 50 miles. Then the radio crackled. Tom, we've got a report of movement on the Story of the Forest Trail. Camper says someone walked past their site without a light. Just walked by. Slow. No gear. Anyone missing? I asked. No reports? All right, I'll check it. The call wasn't concerning. Hikers wander at night sometimes, especially the ones who think they're braver than they are. Usually drunk, lost, or both. Still, something in the dispatcher's voice felt off, like she didn't believe her own explanation. The trail was dead quiet. Not the normal night quiet where you hear insects, a distant owl, maybe leaves falling. No, this was heavier. Muted. I was halfway down the path when I saw him. A man walking toward me, barefoot. Wearing a flannel shirt and jeans, clothes filthy like he'd rolled through mud. He moved slowly, deliberately, as if each step was practiced. But what froze me wasn't his clothes or the walking. It was the smile. Wide, stiff, unbroken. Too wide. Like he'd been holding it for hours and his face had forgotten how to stop. I lifted my flashlight. Sir, are you all right? He kept walking, still smiling. As he got closer, I saw details that shouldn't have been there. His pupils didn't move with the light. His cheeks trembled slightly, like the muscles were exhausted. And his eyes were watering, not from fear, but from strain, like the smile was physically hurting him. I stepped in front of him. Sir, stop, talk to me. He finally did. A small, breathy whisper. You should have stayed inside. His voice didn't match the smile. It was tired, scared. I felt a cold pressure tighten around my ribs. Inside what? He pointed, slowly, arm stiff, toward the tree line. Then he giggled. Not a human giggle, not a natural one. It sounded like something trying to imitate laughter after only hearing it from a great distance. A broken copying attempt. Then he stopped giggling instantly and froze, smile still plastered on his face. I took one step toward him. He bolted. I've seen people run out of fear. They sprint, stumble, trip, push themselves. But this man, he ran like he was being pulled. His legs moved mechanically, his arms didn't swing, his back stayed straight. Like he was a puppet whose strings were snapped tight. He tore into the trees at a speed that didn't make sense for someone barefoot. I shouted for him to stop, but he didn't slow down. I radioed. Possible distressed hiker. Male, barefoot, unresponsive. Pursuing. More static than usual answered back, like the signal had to fight through something to reach me. I followed him into the woods. But when I reached the tree line, he was gone. No branches moving, no leaves disturbed, no sound. Just a wall of trees staring back at me. I swept my flashlight across the woods. Nothing. But the smile, that impossible smile, it stuck in my mind like an afterimage burned into my eyes. I felt watched. I didn't want to step deeper into the trees, but leaving a possibly injured man wasn't an option. I moved slowly, scanning every inch of the forest. 10 feet in, 20, 30. Still nothing. Then the radio hissed violently in my belt. Not static, but a sharp inhale, like someone sucking air between their teeth. I froze. A voice whispered through the static. Behind. I spun. Light cut through darkness, illuminating nothing but trunks and branches. The voice whispered again, behind you. I turned in a full circle. Still nothing. But now the forest felt wrong. The air too thick, too heavy. The trees too densely packed, like they had shifted while I wasn't looking. My breathing grew shallow. Sir, I called out. You need medical attention. Come toward my voice. No response. Then, a branch cracked, far too close behind me. I whipped the flashlight around. And there he was. He stood maybe 12 feet away, smiling. Still smiling. His chest rose and fell rapidly like he'd been running for hours. His bare feet were bleeding. His shirt was torn. But the smile hadn't budged even a millimeter. His eyes, though, his eyes were pleading, terrified. "Sir," I said softly, "tell me who did this to you." Slowly, painfully, he raised his hand and pointed at himself. Not his chest, not his head, not his face, exactly at the smile. Like he wanted me to understand that it wasn't him, that it didn't belong to him. His lips trembled, his eyes flooded, his body shook. And then, with a desperate, strained whisper, he said, "It's not finished with me yet." Before I could speak, his smile widened, stretched unnaturally sideways. The skin near the corners of his mouth cracked. His whole body jerked backwards, not like he stepped, but like someone yanked him by an invisible rope tied around his spine. His feet dragged deep lines in the dirt as he was pulled into the trees. I ran after him, shouting, but in seconds he vanished. We searched until dawn. K-9 units, rangers, volunteers. Not a single footprint. Not a drop of blood. Nothing. It was as if he never existed. Dispatch swore no one had called in a missing person matching his description. No cars abandoned near the trailheads. No campers reported strange activity. Every official explanation fell apart. But I knew what I saw, what I heard, and most of all, what I felt. That smile wasn't human, not anymore. Whatever was pulling him, it wasn't done with him. I stayed in the Park Service another decade before transferring out. Never saw anything like that again. But every year or two, a tourist report comes in. Barefoot man watching us from the trees. Smiling hiker wandering around camp. Strange giggling at night. The descriptions always match. Filthy flannel, bare feet, wide smile, too wide. Rangers write it off as pranksters, as misidentifications, as fear-playing tricks. But one detail always catches my attention. They always say the same thing. He wasn't smiling because he was happy. He was smiling because he couldn't stop. People ask why I don't work nights anymore. I don't tell them the truth. I just say, I've seen enough strange things in the dark. Because if I told them what really happened, if I told them that sometimes, late at night in Shenandoah, you can still see a barefoot man smiling from the trees, they wouldn't believe me. And worse, they might go looking for him. Most days as a ranger blend together. Trail checks, campsite inspections, weather updates. But every now and then, a day arrives that pulls a corner of the world back and shows you something you weren't meant to see. March 23, 2004 was that day for me. It started normally. Clear morning, good visibility, a little humidity hanging in the air like it always does in the Smokies. My assignment was routine. Check storm damage along the Alum Cave Trail. Make sure no deadfall was blocking the route after the night's heavy winds. I had no reason to expect anything strange, until I found the cabin. I was about 3 miles in when I noticed a thin column of smoke rising through the trees. Not white like a campfire, a dull, oily gray. Too steady to be fog. Campfires aren't allowed off-trail in that area. And there were no assigned workers, no shelters, no private property for miles. I followed the smoke. The deeper I went, the quieter the forest got. At first, I didn't notice it. The Smokies always have lulls. But then I realized there were no birds, no insects, not even the distant chatter of squirrels. Just my boots crunching through damp leaves. Then I saw it. A cabin. Small, old. Wooden boards swollen from moisture. A metal chimney leaning to one side. And a lantern glowing faintly through the one window. I stopped dead. There were no structures recorded anywhere near this sector. I knew the map of the park like the lines of my own hands. I could have navigated it blind. But I had never seen this place, and I knew it shouldn't exist. I radioed in. Dispatch, this is Ranger Petra Miles. I'm near Alum Cave, southeast quadrant. I found a cabin out here. Smoke coming from the chimney. Can you confirm anything listed in this area? Static. Then, negative, Petra. No structures in that region. You sure it's not just a fallen tree or fog? I'm looking right at it. A longer pause this time. Stay cautious. Could be an illegal squatter. Copy. But it didn't feel like a squatter's place. It felt abandoned. And wrong. I approached slowly. When I reached the porch, I noticed there were no footprints in the mud. None. Not from boots, not from bare feet, not from animals. Just smooth, untouched sludge, except for my prints. Yet the lantern inside flickered gently. Someone had to have lit it. I knocked on the door. "Park ranger, anyone hurt? Anyone in need of assistance?" The lantern flickered harder, like wind hit it. But the cabin had no open windows, and no draft reached me on the porch. I knocked again. No answer. I pressed my ear to the wood. Silence. Finally, I tried the doorknob. It turned easily. When I stepped in, the lantern was still glowing. But the room was empty. No table, no bed, no stove, no tools, no clothes, not even dust on the floor. Just bare wooden walls and the lantern resting in the center of the room. I approached it carefully. The lantern flame didn't waver like real fire. It pulsed, bright, dim, like a heartbeat. I crouched down. Then something cold passed directly behind me. Not air, not a draft. Presence. My chest tightened. I whipped around. No one. But the door, which I had left wide open, was now halfway shut. I took a step toward it. That's when I heard the sound. A low, rhythmic creaking, like someone rocking in a wooden chair. Slow, patient, but there were no chairs. The sound came from the far corner, dark, bare. The creaking continued, back and forth, back and forth. The lantern pulsed in time with it. I backed up, trying to control my breathing. I whispered, "Who's here?" The creaking stopped instantly. A moment later, something knocked on the wall from the inside. 4 sharp taps. I ran. I bolted out the door and down the porch steps, nearly twisting my ankle on the uneven boards. When I reached the clearing, I forced myself to stop and look back. The cabin was dark. The lantern was out. Smoke no longer rose from the chimney. Everything was still. Too still. Something was wrong with the forest around it. The treetops leaned slightly inward toward the cabin, like they'd grown that way, drawn toward it. But I hadn't noticed that before. Or maybe I hadn't wanted to notice. I radioed again. "Dispatch, I need backup at my location. Possible structural hazard, possible intruder." More static than before. Then, faintly, Pete, signal. Unusable. The woods felt tighter, heavier, as if the air itself was listening. I forced myself down the trail toward the main path. But after 5 minutes of walking, I realized something chilling. I wasn't reaching the trail. The forest felt the same. The same dip in the ground, the same fallen log, the same cluster of young pines. I'd walked in a loop without turning. I told myself it was just anxiety, disorientation. Rangers aren't immune to panic. I turned around to get my bearings. The cabin was closer than before, at least 50 feet closer. It had shifted toward me, or the forest had shifted around it. Either explanation was unacceptable. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the cabin. Then I heard them, from the trees. Whispers, dozens of them. Low, urgent, overlapping, like voices trying to warn each other, or warn me. I couldn't make out words, just breathy, frantic murmurs. The cabin door creaked open behind me. I didn't look, didn't breathe. The forest pressed in from all sides, the voices growing louder, more insistent. I finally snapped. I ran, full speed, branches tearing at my uniform as the forest thrashed around me like something alive. I didn't look back, not once. Not until I burst onto the real trail, the unmistakable, wide, brown-packed path. The moment my boots hit it, everything stopped. The whispers, the pressure, the wrongness in the air, gone. I turned back. No cabin in sight, just trees. Later that afternoon, 2 other rangers hiked with me to the coordinates. Nothing. No clearing, no chimney, no lantern, no sign of an old structure being torn down. Just dense forest floor and moss-covered roots. I tried to explain the way the forest looped me back, how the cabin seemed to move, how the lantern pulsed, how something knocked from inside the walls. They exchanged glances. You were alone, Petra. Maybe the storm got in your head. I didn't argue. There was no point. But as we headed back, Ranger Emerson paused. Hey, he said, kneeling beside a tree. Check this out. The bark on several of the trees was scarred. 4 sharp gouges, deep, evenly spaced, like fingernails. Exactly where I had heard the tapping. He frowned. What animal makes marks like that? None did. But I didn't say anything. I never found that cabin again. But sometimes, only in the early morning when the fog is low, I think I see a faint lantern glow through the trees off trail. Just a pulse. Bright, dim, bright, dim. Like it's waiting for someone to come back inside. I don't follow it. I don't knock. And I never return to that part of the forest alone. Some things in the Smokies aren't meant to be mapped. Some things don't want to stay found. Most people who visit Lake Crescent talk about how calm it looks. The water is so clear and still that, when the morning fog lifts, the lake becomes a perfect mirror. You can stare into it for minutes and forget which direction is up, until the reflection ripples, and suddenly you're reminded that the lake is over 600 feet deep, cold, dark, and unforgiving. I had worked at Olympic for 9 years before the incident, and I thought I knew the lake better than anyone. I thought I understood its moods, its temper. But on the morning of August 14th, 2012, the lake showed me a face I had never seen before. And I still avoid that shoreline whenever I can. The shift started ordinary enough. I arrived at the Storm King Ranger Station at 5:30 a.m. Morning patrol rotates among the team, and that day, it fell on me. My job was simple. Check the shoreline up to Barnes Point, monitor early hikers, and keep an eye on any kayakers foolish enough to head out before the sun fully rose. The water is so cold that hypothermia can set in within minutes. Drownings are usually silent. You don't hear screams, you just find a floating jacket later. The fog was thick that morning, thicker than usual. It rolled low and slow, like something alive drifting across the surface. The air tasted metallic, sharp, as if the lake itself had a pulse. I had just stepped out of my truck when I noticed the shape in the water. A man, waist deep, just standing there. No ripples, no movement, not even the kind of sway you'd expect from someone in the shallows. He was a still silhouette against the gray light. "Hello?" I called out. "Sir, you all right?" At first I thought he was a fisherman. We get older locals who like to wade out early. But as I got closer, I realized something was off. He wasn't wearing modern clothes. His pants were held up with rope. His suspenders were old-fashioned. His wool shirt was soaked and sagging, dark as oil against his chest. He looked like he'd stepped out of a photograph from the 1920s. "Sir," I repeated, "do you need help?" Slowly, painfully slowly, the man turned his head towards me. His neck didn't move right. It was cautious, deliberate, like a puppet testing its strings. His face was expressionless, drained of color. His eyes were hazy, unfocused. His mouth hung slightly open as if breathing took effort. I took a step forward, boots crunching on the rocks. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach twist. His clothes weren't wet. They were dripping, but not with lake water. The droplets falling from him were almost black, thick, like he was soaked in ink instead of water. They stained the surface of the lake in small swirls that dissipated instantly, as if swallowed by something underneath. "Don't move," I said instinctively, reaching for my radio. "I'm coming into the water. Stay where you are." That's when he raised his arm. Slow, tremoring, like he had no strength in him. And he pointed straight down. Not at me. Not at the shore. Down into the water beneath his feet. He didn't blink, didn't change expression, just pointed, fingers shaking slightly. I followed the gesture, staring into the clear lake. But the water was too dark that early, the light too scattered. All I saw was his reflection, bent, distorted, like something was pulling at it from below. Then, without warning, he sank. He didn't fall. He didn't thrash. He didn't gasp. He simply dropped straight under as if his legs vanished beneath him, like a stone. Too fast. I splashed into the water immediately, the cold hitting me like a fist to the chest. I'm a strong swimmer, good under pressure, but the shock knocked the air right out of me. Still, I pushed forward, scanning the surface, kicking deeper. Sir! Sir! But the water was empty, completely still again. No bubbles, no splash trail, no sinking silhouette. He was gone, swallowed by the lake as if he'd never existed. I swam out farther, diving under, scanning the dim, shifting water. My hands cut through the cold, reaching for anything, fabric, skin, movement, but there was nothing. After several minutes of searching, I had to stop. The cold was creeping into my bones, numbing my fingers. I made it back to shore and radioed in the incident. By 6:40 a.m., a dive team was on site. They canvassed the area thoroughly. Sonar scans came back clean. No body, no clothing, not even a disturbed sediment trail. Nothing. I gave my full report, describing the man, the clothes, the way he moved. I could tell the team didn't quite believe me, though they tried to hide it. The lead diver, a gruff guy named Sherman, put a hand on my shoulder and said, "People panic and imagine things, Estrada. You'd be surprised how the fog plays tricks. But fog doesn't dress a man in century-old clothing. Fog doesn't let him point at the water before sinking like a puppet dropped by its strings." I didn't argue, though. Not then. But that night, everything changed. I was on evening patrol along the shoreline, flashlights cutting across the black water. The lake was calm again, smooth like glass. The moon reflected long and silver. Then, from the center of the lake, I heard it. Splash, 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 slow, rhythmic, like footsteps. I froze. The shoreline was empty. No animals, no boats. Nothing that could have made a sound that heavy, that human. I leaned down, watching the surface. The sound continued, measured, steady. Like someone walking in a circle out there, not swimming, not treading water, walking. Then the splashes stopped, except for one final sound. As clear as someone stepping directly toward me. Splash. Water displaced. Just once. As if a foot had stepped down into the lake only a few yards from shore. My breath caught. Nothing moved on the surface. No ripples, no reflection breaking. Then, just as I started to step back, I heard breathing. Not mine. A slow, labored inhale. The same sound the man on the lake had made. Coming from just over the water, I raised my flashlight slowly, expecting, I don't know what. A head emerging from the lake? A man standing again? A face staring back? The beam shook in my hand as I pointed it at the spot where the breathing came from. Nothing. The breathing stopped instantly. The lake went dead still. I backed away until my boots hit gravel. I kept my flashlight trained on the water the entire walk back to my truck. I don't think I blinked once. The next morning, I filed an extended incident report. It's still in the system, though Sherman's handwritten note on the bottom says, possibly fatigue. No evidence. I didn't argue. I didn't want to. Because if I opened my mouth, I think I would have told them the truth. The man didn't drown. He wasn't drowning when I saw him. And whatever he pointed at under the water, whatever pulled him down, is still there. And sometimes when the fog rolls in thick and the lake is quiet, I hear the footsteps again. Walking. Circling. Waiting. I don't go near the shoreline at dawn anymore. And I never, ever enter the water alone.